Now let's move to the one more important area. Analyze problems of Indian fertilizer sector and highlight measures taken by the government. During the time of COVID and during time of Russia and Ukraine crisis, which is currently still going on, this fertilizer industry was so much in the news because this forms the second highest component after the food subsidy in the revenue expenditure. This component has increased, almost doubled. It has crossed some 2.5 lakh crore fertilizer subsidy given by the government because of the supply side bottlenecks that happened during the COVID crisis or during the Russia and Ukraine crisis. Because of that reason, this was so much in the news, and so I have framed the question, and this is the topic that needs to be understood comprehensively. This is a broader issue. Analyze the problem of the Indian fertilizer sector. So this is a picture question. It is not specific or narrowly defined question. India is the largest importer and second largest consumer and third largest producer of the fertilizer. However, this sector is facing multiple constraints. I have given fact-based introduction to this question. India is the first largest importer and second largest consumer and third largest producer of the fertilizer. However, this sector is facing multiple constraints. What are they? Let's try to understand. What are the major fertilizers we have is urea, DAP, MAP. From urea we get this nitrogen. From this we get the phosphorus. From this we get the potash. What happens is currently this urea fertilizer from which we get the nitrogen is heavily regulated by the government. Who has to produce, how much they have to produce, from where they have to import, and what should be the MRP. That is fixed by the government. Currently government fixes the urea cost somewhere around 300 rupees, while the actual production cost is 3000 rupees per kg bag. Can you imagine what is the difference between 300 and 3000 per bag? So that's the reason it is costing us somewhere as high as 2 lakh crores annually. Now what is the problem here? Government will say no matter what is your cost of production, you sell it at 250 rupees. If you are producing at 1000 rupees, still we will pay you whatever the subsidy that is there. If you are producing at 3000, then we will produce as high as, we will transfer you as high as 2750 rupees. So whatever the gap that is there between your production cost and the market MRP fixed by the government, all the amount will be transferred to those companies. So it is breeding inefficiency. If I am the producer, no matter at whatever the cost I produce, that will be compensated by the government. It doesn't matter if I could produce the product at 500 rupees or 1000 rupees at 3000 rupees. It does not matter. Anyway, my MRP will be 250 rupees, and whatever the gap is there, that will be sent by the government. Since this is breeding inefficiency, the production is affected, subsidy bill is increased, and as the cost is regulated, while the other areas are not regulated, people are heavily purchasing this urea based subsidy. Because of this thing, there is huge amount of imbalance in the soil for the nitrogen. The amount of nitrogen present in the soil is very high. Farmer do not have much awareness. He think whatever the fertilizer, it will work. He takes different types of the fertilizers and he feels this urea fertilizer is coming at cheaper cost, let's use them. But this is not the requirement of that soil. That soil might not need at all nitrogen. Though all the Indian soils are nitrogen deficit, that soil might not need that much huge amount of nitrogen. But all the farmers use only nitrogen. There is severe amount of imbalance because government has brought the nutrient based subsidy scheme. In this, what they do is they will give the subsidy based on the nutrient. Government will not regulate the MRP. Government will say, no, these are the nutrients. I will give 10 rupees of subsidy for phosphorus, 5 rupees of subsidy for the potash. So government has fixed the subsidy amount. They are free to fix the MRP. Now, if one company fixes the MRP as 500 rupees. If other company is fixing MRP as 250 rupees, people will go for this thing. But generally what happens is the cost of this thing is higher than this urea. So people do not go for this thing. Added to this nitrogen is also used in the industries. So the people will do black marketing or else leakages. Instead of for the using for the agricultural purposes, they transfer it to the industrial purposes, or they will sell it to the Nepal and neighboring countries and get more money. So because of this policy of government, nutrient based subsidy scheme, and also regulation of urea, huge amount of leakages, economic crisis, fiscal subsidy, inefficiency is breeding in the fertilizer sector. We are not having enough competence to produce in India. Firstly, we do not have the raw material. Even if we import the raw material, we do not, because of this policy, we are breeding inefficiency. So this is major problem. Apart from this, what are the other problems we have? This is causing environmental problems, which I have already mentioned about eutrophication, bioaccumulation, biomagnification. All these things comes. We import because our efficiency is low. We import so huge amount of current account deficit, and the subsidy we give, so causing increase of the revenue expenditure and decrease of the obviously capital expenditure. This will not help us to increase our investment and bring the growth and developmental aspects. Now access. Fertilizer usage would be more in the areas where there is good amount of irrigation. If the irrigation level is very less, then they do not use fertilizers. I have already told you the irrigation access is only 45% of the area. Rest of the area is rainfed farming. So obviously your fertilizer usage or else accessibility is unequal. Fertilizers should be utilized. They should be rationally utilized, properly utilized. But most of the times these fertilizers are used by the highly developed farmers, by the areas which are highly developed. So this is causing regional imbalances. Again, the same points that we have already discussed. Lack of access to the fertilizers. The yield of the crop will be reduced. Either they are using it excessively, the yield will be reduced, soil will be degraded, or access itself is very low, and so there is no growth in the yield. So this is the access related problems. And the raw material, most of the fertilizers are dependent on the raw material like natural gas or the phosphate. These phosphate, phosphorus, all these things are not available enough in the India. We are dependent on even for the raw material from the abroad, these fossil fuels and all. So this is one more bigger concern. And also the fertilizer production and usage is causing greenhouse gases and associated global warming. So these are all problems associated with the fertilizer industry. I have covered it comprehensively. Now these are the points I have mentioned here. Heavy imports, lesser impacts of the irrigation facilities, raw material, phosphate, potash, nitrogen, these are not available. We import majority. Government policies which I have mentioned. Based on the farm size, fertilizer usage is less, soil degradation, all these things are happening, huge amount of subsidy. So government has brought this scheme called soil health card. Now they will do some kind of study and research, and they will tell which soil needs which amount of nutrient. So that is one reform government has introduced. Government has also introduced neem based urea. If you add this neem, now government is aware this urea is being diverted to the industrial purposes. If you add neem, this cannot be diverted for the industrial purposes. So government has introduced neem based urea, and government has introduced direct benefit transfer, where fertilizer is being transferred directly to the farmer to avoid any kind of leakages. I have told you the fertilizer subsidies are being black marketed or else leakages are happening. To reduce this, government has introduced Aadhaar enabled direct benefit transfer for this fertilizer subsidy. Government is promoting organic farming, zero budget natural farming. Government is also promoting the nano fertilizers for effective and efficient delivery of these fertilizers. PM Kisan Samruddhi Kendras. It will cater to the need of the farmers in the country and provide agriculture inputs, fertilizer, seeds, including testing facilities. So these are like areas, centers where they not only provide fertilizers to the farmers but also awareness and information about their soil and their need of fertilizers. These are like Raitu Bharosa Kendras, nano urea, neem coated urea, and currently now they are coming with the one nation and one farm, one fertilizer. So those now the fertilizers will come without any brand, without any kind of logo. So all the fertilizers will have without any brand. So this is also to promote one fertilizer and one nation, nothing. And one scheme I have forgot is PM Pranam. This PM Pranam is a scheme where state governments would be incentivized. Whichever the state government tries to reduce the fertilizer subsidy or tries to bring down the usage of the fertilizer, then those state governments would be incentivized through transfer of some funds. Now these funds would not be transferred through any creation or allocation of the budget. Whatever the money that state governments have been reduced, that same money would be utilized to transfer to the state government. So various reforms are being done by the state governments. So all these reforms should be done along with the urea bringing under the nutrient based subsidy scheme can be a good conclusion for this question. Thank you.